First contact shock. High Admiral Ixura of the Galactic Defense Council stared at the holographic display with all four of her eyes, mandibles twitching in disbelief. The footage playing before her showed what should have been an overwhelming victory for the Craxian Empire's elite forces. Instead, it documented their complete destruction at the hands of a supposedly primitive species that had only achieved faster-than-light travel within the last century. "Play it again," she commanded, her crystalline voice sharp with tension. Her chief analyst, senior researcher Vextal, obliged without comment. The hologram flickered to life once more, showing the initial engagement between Craxian forces and the human defenders on mining station K419. The Craxians had followed standard military doctrine perfectly. They had cut off all escape routes, disabled the station's primary systems, and deployed in overwhelming numbers. By all tactical analyses, the human security force should have surrendered immediately. They were outgunned, outnumbered, and trapped. Instead, they did something unprecedented. "Freeze playback," Ixura ordered. "Vextal, explain what I'm seeing here." The analyst's skin shifted through shades of blue as he gathered his thoughts. The humans immediately split their forces into smaller units. "High Admiral, this defies all known combat logic. Every spacefaring species we've encountered maintains unit cohesion in combat situations. It's an evolutionary constant, strength in numbers. Yet these humans deliberately separated." "Yes, and watch what happens next." The footage resumed. The smaller human units seemed to move with impossible coordination, despite having no direct line of sight to each other. They used the station's maintenance tunnels, air ducts, and cargo systems in ways that suggested intimate familiarity with the environment, despite this being their first time on the station. "They're reading the architecture," Vextal explained. "Humans have an extraordinary ability to understand artificial environments. Where we see a maintenance shaft, they see a flanking route. Where we see a power conduit, they see cover. It's as if they instinctively understand how to weaponize their surroundings." The footage showed a human soldier deliberately exposing herself to draw fire, while her companions used the distraction to move through the shadows. Another group had somehow reprogrammed the station's cargo loading systems to drop shipping containers on the Craxian forces. "Their cognitive flexibility is unprecedented," Vextal continued. "Look here. They've turned the station's atmospheric processors into chemical weapons by introducing industrial cleaners into the ventilation system. No other species would even consider such tactics. It requires too many cognitive leaps, too much creative thinking under pressure." Ixura watched as the humans systematically dismantled a force 10 times their size. They used improvised explosives, makeshift traps, and psychological warfare with equal skill. When cornered, instead of surrendering, they became even more lethal, using their desperate situation to lure in overconfident enemies. "Show me their neural scans," she ordered. The display shifted to show comparative brain activity between human combatants and other known species. The difference was striking. Where other species showed predictable patterns of either aggression or fear response, the human brains displayed something else entirely, a state of hyper-focused calm. "They call it combat flow," Vextal explained. "Under conditions that would trigger panic or berserker rage in other species, humans achieve a state of enhanced cognitive function. Their decision-making actually improves under pressure." The final segments of footage showed the humans' extraction. They hadn't simply retreated. They had turned their entire escape route into a killing ground, using precisely timed detonations, and deliberately collapsed sections to trap and eliminate their pursuers. "How many Craxian casualties?" Ixura asked, though she already knew the answer. "Total, High Admiral. The entire force was eliminated. We found no evidence of human casualties, though we confirmed at least 3 of them sustained injuries during the engagement." Ixura's lower mandibles clicked together, a sign of deep concern among her species. "Their injury response is particularly troubling. They don't withdraw wounded fighters from combat." "No, High Admiral. They adapt to their injuries and continue fighting. In several cases, they actually use their wounded status to appear vulnerable and draw in Craxian forces. They seem to view everything, even their own damaged state, as a potential tactical advantage. The High Admiral rose from her command chair, her iridescent scales reflecting the holographic light. The Council needs to understand what we're dealing with. These humans, they're not just another spacefaring species. They're something we've never encountered before. Your recommendations, High Admiral. Revise all tactical doctrines regarding human engagement. And, she paused, mandibles twitching again, begin exploring diplomatic options. If we can't guarantee victory against them, we need to ensure we never face them as enemies. The footage continued to play silently behind them, showing humans turning a simple mining station into a fortress of death. A grim testament to humanity's lethal creativity. Vextal's skin had settled into a deep purple of concern. There's one more thing, High Admiral. This footage. It's from their civilian security forces. These weren't even their military personnel. Ixera's scales rippled with shock. If these were merely human civilian defenders, what were their actual warriors capable of? The implication sent a shiver through all her appendages. The Galactic Defense Council would need to be notified immediately. Everything they thought they knew about warfare was about to change. The psychology of warriors. Senior researcher Vextal stood before the Emergency Council of Xenopsychology, his presentation causing waves of distress-colored bioluminescence to ripple through the assembled academics. The chamber's organic architecture pulsed with anxiety as he displayed his findings on human combat psychology. Distinguished colleagues, he began, his own skin shifting through shades of analytical blue. Our standard models for predicting battlefield behavior have proven worse than useless when applied to humans. They don't just fail to predict human responses, they actively mislead us into fatal miscalculations. The holographic display showed side-by-side comparisons of neural activity between various species under combat stress. The contrast was striking. Where other species' brains showed clear patterns of either aggressive activation or survival-focused shutdown, the human brains displayed something entirely different. We've termed this the paradox of human combat psychology. Vextal continued. When faced with lethal danger, humans enter a state we've never observed in any other species. They become simultaneously more aggressive and more analytical, more creative and more disciplined, more individual and more coordinated. He gestured to a new set of scans. Observe these readings from the mining station K419 incident. As the situation became more desperate, the humans' cognitive function actually improved. They achieved faster reaction times, better tactical analysis, and enhanced problem-solving capabilities. A member of the council, distinguished Professor Yulthera, raised a tentacle in question. Could this be an evolutionary adaptation? Perhaps their homeworld was particularly dangerous. We considered that, Vextal replied. But Earth, while challenging, isn't notably more dangerous than other life-bearing worlds. What makes humans unique is their response to danger. They don't just survive it. They learn from it, adapt to it, and ultimately master it. The display shifted to show footage from various human combat engagements. Notice how they use fear as a tool. When they're afraid, they don't become less effective. They become more dangerous. They channel their fear into heightened awareness and aggression. The assembled synopsychologists watched as human soldiers repeatedly demonstrated this principle. Where other species would retreat from overwhelming force, humans would attack. Where others would freeze in panic, humans would innovate. But perhaps most disturbing is their ability to maintain psychological stability under conditions that would break most species, Vextal continued. We've documented humans continuing to fight effectively, despite injuries that would incapacitate most beings, not from biological durability, but through sheer psychological resilience. He brought up new data streams. They have a concept they call spite. When faced with impossible odds, instead of surrendering or fleeing, Humans often become more determined. They'll sustain horrific injuries, endure extreme conditions, and continue fighting long past the point where victory seems possible. The council chamber filled with concerned murmuring. Professor Ilthera spoke again. "Are you suggesting they're irrational?" "Quite the opposite," Vextal replied. "Their spite is coldly logical in its own way. By refusing to surrender even in hopeless situations, they raise the cost of engaging them so high that victory becomes Pyrrhic. It's a form of psychological warfare. They make themselves so costly to fight that potential enemies choose not to engage them at all." The display showed another tactical analysis. They've weaponized this reputation. Many of their victories now come without fighting at all, as other species choose to negotiate rather than face them in combat. They've turned their psychological resilience into a strategic deterrent. Vextal's skin shifted to the deep purple of grave concern. But what truly sets them apart is their ability to maintain their moral and ethical frameworks, even in the midst of combat. Unlike most species, who either shut down higher reasoning or give in to berserker rage, humans can remain rational and controlled while fighting at peak effectiveness. He brought up his final slides. They can switch between lethal violence and peaceful interaction with disturbing ease. A human can kill an enemy combatant and then immediately provide medical care to that same enemy if they surrender. This cognitive flexibility defies our understanding of combat psychology. The council chamber had grown very quiet. Finally, Professor Ilthera spoke again. "Your recommendations?" "We need to fundamentally revise our understanding of sapient psychology," Vextal replied. "Humans prove that our models are too limited. They demonstrate capabilities we thought were mutually exclusive: aggression with control, fear with effectiveness, individual action with group coordination." He paused, his skin shifting to the white of ultimate concern. "But most importantly, we need to understand that humans don't just fight with their bodies or their weapons. They fight with their minds, their emotions, and their will. Every aspect of their psychology becomes a weapon." The display showed one final image: a human soldier helping up a wounded comrade while simultaneously covering their retreat with precise fire. They have a saying: "The most dangerous weapon is the human mind." Our research suggests this isn't metaphorical. Their greatest advantage isn't their technology, their numbers, or their physical capabilities. It's their ability to think, adapt, and overcome. And until we understand that, we cannot hope to either fight them or work with them effectively. The council chamber's organic architecture had darkened to the deep colors of profound concern. The implications were clear. They weren't just dealing with another spacefaring species. They were facing something their psychological models couldn't predict or constrain. And that made humans the most dangerous beings in known space. The pack hunters. Field Commander Nakthal crouched in the observation blind. His photoreceptors focused on the human military exercise taking place in the designated neutral zone. As head of the Galactic Defense Council's Combat Analysis Division, he had been granted unprecedented access to observe human training procedures. What he witnessed both fascinated and disturbed him. "Record analysis stream," he subvocalized to his neural interface. Human squad tactics represent a paradox of military theory. They operate simultaneously as individuals and as a collective, in a way no other known species has achieved. Below, the human training squad moved through the artificial terrain. Their movements seemed chaotic at first glance, each soldier appearing to act independently. But Nakthal's enhanced vision could detect the subtle patterns, the invisible web of coordination that linked their actions. "They call it individual initiative within command intent," he noted. "Each human maintains freedom of action while instinctively supporting the group's objectives. It's reminiscent of ancient pack hunting behaviors, but elevated to an unprecedented level of sophistication." The exercise intensified as simulated enemies engaged the human squad. Nakthal's auxiliary brain began cataloging the patterns of response. The humans didn't bunch together like Craxian warriors or form rigid formations like the Vextal defense forces. Instead, they seemed to flow like water, constantly shifting positions while maintaining perfect awareness of each other's locations. Their communication systems appear redundant at first analysis, he continued. They use verbal commands, hand signals, body language, and encrypted radio simultaneously. But this isn't inefficiency, it's adaptation. If one communication channel is compromised, they seamlessly shift to others without losing coordination. A simulated explosion separated two humans from their squad. Instead of becoming isolated and vulnerable, they immediately formed a micro-unit, adjusting their tactics for their reduced numbers while still coordinating with the main group. Their ability to scale their tactical approaches is remarkable. From single operators to small teams to large units, they maintain consistent effectiveness. They seem to instinctively understand how to adjust their tactics based on available numbers. Nachthal's attention was drawn to a particularly interesting maneuver. The human squad had split into 3 elements, each appearing to operate independently. But as their exercise enemies responded to one group, they found themselves caught in a carefully orchestrated crossfire from the others. They're not just coordinating their actions, he realized. They're coordinating their enemies' reactions. Each human movement is designed not just to achieve its immediate objective, but to force their opponents into positions of vulnerability that other squad members can exploit. The exercise shifted to close-quarters combat. Here, the humans' pack-hunting heritage became even more apparent. They moved in fluid pairs and trios, covering angles, creating crossfires, and never allowing their opponents to focus on a single target. Their training emphasizes what they call battle buddy systems, permanent 2-person teams within the larger squad. These pairs develop near telepathic levels of coordination, able to anticipate and support each other's actions without explicit communication. A simulated casualty scenario drew Nachthal's particular attention. When one human went down, the squad's response was immediate but measured. They maintained tactical effectiveness while extracting their wounded, turning the rescue operation into an offensive maneuver that caught their opponents off guard. Their pack instincts extend to casualty care, he noted. They never abandon their wounded, but neither do they allow rescue operations to compromise their tactical position. Instead, they incorporate casualty extraction into their attack plans, using the enemy's expectation of weakness to create opportunities. As the exercise concluded, Nachthal observed the humans' post-action analysis. Their discussion was intense but not hostile, each member contributing observations and accepting criticism with what appeared to be genuine openness. Even their learning is collective, he noted. Each exercise is followed by what they call an after-action review, where the entire squad analyzes their performance. Mistakes are treated as learning opportunities for the group, not individual failures. This allows them to rapidly evolve their tactics based on experience. Nachthal's final observations focused on the human command structure. Unlike the rigid hierarchies of most military species, human units displayed a remarkable flexibility of leadership. Their formal rank structure exists alongside an informal competency-based hierarchy. In any given situation, leadership can shift to the soldier with the most relevant skills or experience. This fluidity allows them to adapt to changing conditions without losing unit cohesion. As he prepared to transmit his findings to the council, Nachthal added one final note. Human pack tactics represent an evolutionary advantage we had not previously considered possible. They have combined the coordinated hunting strategies of pack predators with advanced cognitive abilities and technology, creating something entirely new in the history of warfare. Their ability to think and act both individually and collectively, to coordinate without sacrificing initiative, and to adapt their social structures to combat requirements makes them uniquely dangerous. They are not simply warriors. They are pack hunters who have turned the battlefield into their hunting ground. The implications were clear. Any species facing humans in combat wouldn't just be fighting individual soldiers or even a military unit. They would be facing an integrated hunting pack, one that combined primitive predatory instincts with advanced tactical thinking in ways that defied conventional military doctrine. The galaxy had never seen anything quite like them. and that made them more formidable than anyone had imagined. Masters of Adaptation. Dr. Senna Zalveri, lead researcher of the Galactic Archaeological Institute, stood before the assembled Council of Sciences, her tentacles rippling with academic excitement as she presented her findings. The holographic display behind her showed various human battlefields throughout history, from ancient earthen fortifications to modern space stations. Distinguished colleagues, she began, our study of human military history has revealed something unprecedented. Unlike any other species we've encountered, humans don't adapt to their environment. They adapt their environment to themselves, and they do it with frightening speed and creativity. The display shifted to show the recent Titan Meridian Station incident. Consider this case study. When separatist forces seized this mining facility, they believed its industrial nature would neutralize the human defenders' technological advantages. Instead, the humans turned every aspect of the station's infrastructure into weapons. She highlighted various sections of the station. They converted ore processing machines into projectile launchers. They weaponized the atmospheric processors to create zones of lethal gas. They even reprogrammed maintenance drones into reconnaissance units. But what's truly remarkable isn't just what they did. It's how quickly they did it. A council member raised an appendage. Clarify the time frame. 17 standard minutes, Senna replied, causing a wave of color-shocked responses through the assembly. From the moment the attack began, it took them just 17 minutes to begin transforming industrial equipment into military assets. This wasn't pre-planned. They improvised these adaptations under combat conditions. The display shifted to show human neural scans. Their brains appear uniquely suited to this kind of adaptive thinking. When humans examine any object or environment, they automatically analyze it for multiple potential uses. They call it lateral thinking. But it's more than that. It's a form of intuitive engineering that operates even under extreme stress. She brought up comparison footage from other species' combat encounters. Most sentient beings, when fighting in an industrial or civilian environment, try to work around the existing infrastructure. Humans instantly start evaluating how to weaponize it. Nothing is just what it appears to be to them. Everything is a potential tool or weapon. The display showed examples. Loading dock equipment turned into anti-armor weapons, ventilation systems converted to troop movements, civilian communications gear repurposed into military command networks. But it goes deeper than just weaponizing their environment. Senna continued, humans instinctively understand how to create tactical advantages from terrain. They don't just use cover, they create it. They don't just find choke points, they engineer them. Every space they occupy becomes a potential fortress or trap. She highlighted footage from various human conflicts. Look at how they layer their defenses. They never rely on a single approach. They combine physical barriers, electronic warfare, psychological operations, and environmental hazards in ways that multiply their effectiveness. A human-defended position isn't just protected. It's transformed into an integrated combat system. The council chamber hummed with concerned discussion. Another member spoke. Could this be technological superiority? No, Senna replied firmly. That's what makes this so remarkable. We've observed this behavior at all technological levels. Ancient humans with primitive tools showed the same basic patterns of environmental adaptation that we see in their modern space marines. The technology just gives them more options. The fundamental approach remains constant. She brought up new data streams. They've developed entire military doctrines around this capability. They call it terrain modification or battlefield preparation. But those terms undersell what they're actually doing. They're not just modifying terrain. They're completely reimagining the purpose and potential of every environment they encounter. The display showed a time-lapse of human defenders transforming a standard habitat module. Watch how quickly they identify and exploit key features. Within minutes, they've created interlocking fields of fire, multiple escape routes, improvised weapons, and sensor networks. They don't see the habitat as it is. They see what it could become. Senna's tentacles rippled with academic intensity, but perhaps most significantly, they share and build upon these adaptations. When one human unit discovers a new way to weaponize an environment, that knowledge spreads rapidly through their forces. They're constantly learning, innovating, and improving their techniques. She brought up her final analysis. This adaptive capability makes traditional defensive doctrine against humans essentially useless. You cannot deny them resources because they turn everything into a resource. You cannot deprive them of weapons because they turn their environment into a weapon. You cannot trap them because they excel at transforming confined spaces to their advantage. The display showed one final image, a simple human multi-tool. This embodies their approach to warfare. It's not just a tool, it's a philosophy. Everything can be adapted, modified, and repurposed. Every environment can be transformed. Every limitation can be turned into an advantage. The council chamber had grown very quiet. Finally, the head of sciences spoke. Your recommendations. We must fundamentally revise our understanding of military environments, Senna replied. When facing humans, we cannot think in terms of advantageous or disadvantageous terrain. In their hands, any environment becomes a potential weapon. The only safe approach is to assume that whatever space they occupied will be transformed into a fortress, and whatever resources they have access to will become military assets. She concluded with a sobering observation. In essence, we're not just fighting human soldiers, we're fighting human-modified environments. And that makes conventional military doctrine not just ineffective, but actively dangerous. Because by the time you engage humans in combat, they've already transformed the battlefield in ways you haven't even imagined. The council chamber's bioluminescence had dimmed to the deep colors of profound concern. They had discovered yet another dimension of human combat capability that defied their understanding of warfare. And with each such discovery, humanity became more terrifying. The ultimate survival machines. Grand Archivist Telmar stood in the ancient Hall of Species, addressing the combined Council of Science and Defense. The vast chamber's crystalline walls reflected the holographic displays of human history, from their earliest stone tools to their latest starships. Honorable members of the Council, Telmar began, his chromatophores shifting through shades of revelation. We have been studying humans through the wrong lens. We focused on their individual capabilities, their pack tactics, their psychological resilience, and their environmental adaptation. But these are merely symptoms of their true advantage, one that makes them the most dangerous species we've ever encountered. The display shifted to show the evolutionary timeline of various spacefaring races. Every species learns. Every species adapts. But humans do something unprecedented in the history of life as we know it. They accelerate their own evolution through the transmission of knowledge. Telmar brought up comparative data streams. Other species pass on genetic advantages. Humans pass on ideas. Other species adapt over generations through natural selection. Humans adapt within lifetimes through learning and teaching. The speed of their advancement isn't just unusual. It defies evolutionary models. The chamber filled with murmurs as Telmar displayed footage from human military training. Watch how they practice. They don't just rehearse scenarios they've encountered. They imagine scenarios they've never seen. They deliberately create new challenges for themselves. They invent enemies that don't exist to prepare for enemies they haven't met. He highlighted neural scans of humans during combat training. Their brains form new neural pathways with extraordinary speed. Each generation of humans doesn't start from zero. They begin with the accumulated knowledge of all previous generations, and then they build upon it. Every human warrior carries within them the distilled experience of countless ancestors. The display showed examples of human military innovation throughout history. Look at how quickly they advance. Other species typically require multiple generations to significantly improve their military technology or tactics. Humans can make revolutionary advances within a single generation, sometimes within a single battle. A council member raised an appendage. Could this not make them predictable? If they rely on past knowledge, Quite the opposite, Telmar replied. They don't just remember, they analyze, combine, and transform their knowledge. They take lessons from one type of warfare and apply them to completely different scenarios. They blend ancient wisdom with new technology in ways we can barely comprehend. He brought up footage from recent engagements. A human squad recently defeated a Craxian force using tactics adapted from ancient Earth forest hunters, combined with modern technology. They don't see their history as a rigid template. They see it as a vast library of concepts to be recombined and reinvented. The display shifted to show human military academies, but most frightening is their systematic approach to warfare. They don't just learn from experience. They study it. They analyze every battle, every war, every engagement. They maintain vast archives of combat data. They simulate countless scenarios. Their warriors train not just in fighting, but in understanding the fundamental principles of combat itself. Telmar's chromatophores pulsed with intensity, and they share everything. When one human unit discovers an effective tactic, it doesn't remain isolated. It's analyzed, documented, and distributed throughout their forces. They have created something unprecedented. A collective military intelligence that grows exponentially. The chamber darkened as Telmar reached his crucial point. But what truly sets them apart is their ability to learn from failure. Other species typically repeat successful strategies until they fail catastrophically. Humans deliberately seek out their own weaknesses. They stage war games where half their forces play the enemy, specifically to expose their vulnerabilities. He showed footage of human military exercises. They call it red teaming. Dedicated units whose sole purpose is to think like their enemies and find ways to defeat human tactics. They actively work to prove themselves wrong, to find flaws in their own strategies. This level of systematic self-criticism is unknown among other species. The display showed the aftermath of various human conflicts, and they learn fastest from defeat. When humans lose a battle, they don't just experience failure, they study it. They transform their losses into future victories by analyzing every detail, understanding every mistake, and developing countermeasures to prevent similar defeats. Telmar's final slides showed the exponential growth of human military capabilities since they achieved spaceflight. This is why they are so dangerous. It's not their current capabilities that should concern us. It's their rate of advancement. Every engagement with humans makes them stronger. Every conflict teaches them. Every challenge improves them. The council chamber had grown very still. The head of defense spoke. Your conclusions. We are not facing just another warrior species, Telmar replied. We are facing the ultimate learning machine. A species that has turned warfare itself into a science, that treats combat as a puzzle to be solved, that transforms every experience, victory or defeat, into improved capabilities. His chromatophores shifted to the white of ultimate warning. If we engage them in prolonged conflict, we won't be fighting the humans we face today. We'll be fighting an continuously improving force that learns from every encounter. Traditional military doctrine assumes that attrition favors the defender. With humans, the opposite is true. The longer we fight them, the more dangerous they become. The final display showed a simple human classroom. This is their true superweapon. Not their guns, their ships, or their tactics, but their ability to learn, to teach, to improve. Every human warrior carries within them not just their own experience, but the analyzed and refined experience of their entire species. The council chamber's crystalline walls had darkened to the deep colors of existential concern. They had finally understood what made humans truly unique and truly terrifying. They weren't just warriors. They were warriors who had turned warfare itself into a science, who had accelerated their own evolution through the systematic study of combat. The galaxy would never be the same.